you citizens of the world, wherever you are, wherever you're going. Welcome to Live from the Heartland. We call it Heartland at home because once the pandemic hit, we could no longer do it in the WLUW studios. So we're doing it from home, and we call it Heartland at home. And this is number 159 since the beginning of the pandemic. This is for July 1st, and we are recording it on June 28th in the year 2023. I'm here with my trusted engineer, son Hal James, and we have a good lineup for you. We're going to have one person coming on, Lydia Wilson, to talk about Andrew Tate and the far right making common cause with Islamists. And we'll be joined by our regular sports commentator, Gordon Thomson, all the way from Newark, Delaware. Actually, our first guest is all the way from Northern England. So here in Chicago, we got a pretty heavy weather crisis going on. The smoke from the fires in Quebec up in Canada really hit New York and the East Coast, but they've shifted west. And I'm going to read a little quote out of this week's New Yorker, the July 3rd New Yorker magazine that my wife Paige just handed me. It said, "Good health has, in some sense, always been a fight with nature. For much of history, that battle has been waged against microbes, mutations, and the ravages of old age. Increasingly, however, we find ourselves contending with the planet itself, a consequence of the damage that we've inflicted upon it. For many of us, the danger has long seemed remote, theoretical, and abstract. Now simply breathing makes it hard to ignore." And that's from Dhruv Kular in the new issue of the New Yorker magazine. I assume everybody who's listening and watching knows that we had perhaps a failed coup. It's not clear what happened in Russia, but there's a lot of news and a lot of talk about it. I encourage people to stay tuned because it has serious ramifications for things on many fronts. Those of you in Chicago know that we have a big race coming up this weekend. It's like a street race of NASCAR cars. There were a lot of people who were grumbling about it. Some people are kind of getting enthused about it. I'm just going to take it all in, and I don't think I'm going to get too close. Maybe we'll watch it on the TV. Also, I heard yesterday that lab-grown meat has been approved for the market. So get ready for all of that. Over in Israel settler gangs on Sunday morning this past week burned crops in the Palestinian town of Tmusea, north of Ramallah, only days after the village was subjected to a rampage that left at least 30 houses and 70 vehicles burned. And they also are going to expand settler expansion into the, whatever the occupied territory is. I'm going to have, I think, Marilyn Katz, a good friend of the show and of mine, come on and talk about what's going on in Israel next week. We'll see if that gets pulled off, but hopefully it does. We are waiting at this moment for the Supreme Court's decision on affirmative action. It's not predicted to be good from a progressive point of view, but there was something happened in the Supreme Court this week that really was good. In Moore versus Harper, the Supreme Court by a vote of 6-3 decided against the so-called independent state legislature doctrine. That would have done away with the concept that the popular vote should decide elections. State legislators do not have unchecked power when drawing congressional districts, the court said. The decision means state courts can intervene in cases of gerrymandered districts and review legislatures' approaches to federal election rules. It goes on. You can find a lot of information about it, but it means that probably in states like Louisiana and Alabama, there will be more than just one congressional district represented by an African American. Also on the Supreme Court, I did see a little note somewhere, and I don't have any more information, but it said, and talk of Thomas and Alito retiring raises the stakes for the election in 2024, to say the least. If the Democrats win and some people retired, the whole negative state of affairs we've had with the Supreme Court for a number of years will change. A friend down in Texas, Alice Embry, posted today that the largest nurses' strike in Texas is going on at Ascension Hospital in Austin today. She says it's huge turnout despite brutal heat. And for those of you who watch this on youtube.com/heartlandmedia/videos, get to see some pictures of that strike. Here in Chicago, there have been a number of changes of where the people seeking asylum have been housed. Sometimes it's been at police stations. There is a new committee on immigrant and refugee rights meeting actually today. That's Wednesday, the 28th. It's under the leadership of our friend, the Alderman Andre Vasquez from the 40th. And they are going to think about meeting regularly, and I would hope they do because this is a big issue. And what we do in Chicago, one of the most friendly cities in the world, will have ramifications elsewhere. So that's it for a little bit of opening chatter. And we're going to come on now with Lydia Wilson, who is the culture editor of New Lines magazine. And we're going to hear about Andrew Tate and the far right making common cause with Islamists. Not that widespread, but it is growing, and it's something you should all know about. Okay, we'll be right back with more Live from the Heartland. Don't go too far here. Stay tuned on the left end of your dial if you're listening to it on WLUW either Saturday morning at 9 or Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. Now we're going to bring on our first guest for this week's Live from the Heartland, and it is for the July 1st show. We are recording on the 28th, I repeat. And I'm really honored to bring on Lydia Wilson, who is the culture editor of the new magazine, New Lines, which a fellow Rogers Park 49th Ward neighbor, Danny Postal, works with. And he led me to this great article by Lydia Wilson and Rasha Al Aqeedi. Both of them are editors for the new magazine, New Lines. And they have an article in the current issue, and I'll read the title. It's a long title, How Andrew Tate and the Far Right Made Common Cause with Islamists. Western groups find in Muslim communities what they believe is a prototype for a social contract free of wokeism and women's liberation. Hi there, Lydia.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Take it away. Tell us what the article is all about, what you two have uncovered and what you've been working on for, I understand, a number of years.
Well, yeah, it goes back a long way. Both of us, from very different perspectives, have been keeping an eye on what is known as the manosphere, which is a loose collection of online subcultures and communities, but they're bound by common things. One is misogyny, a real feeling that anything wrong with their life, any lack of status, any change, anything like not being able to get a girl, not being able to find the life you want. The common culprit is usually feminism or women. Women are taking our jobs. Women don't know their place. It was when gender roles changed that life started going wrong for men. That's the theory, kind of really grouping together the manosphere. It encompasses a few different attitudes within that, but misogyny and this longing for a traditional gender role and traditional family structures really group these people together. And now, sadly, that also comes with hefty homophobia and also a lot of conspiracy and also a lot of anti-Semitism. So that it's really some murky, dodgy corners of the internet. And what we noticed after many years of monitoring it is this stuff wasn't staying in these murky corners. It was going fairly mainstream, and we were seeing it come out onto the social media platforms, onto media, mainstream media, and in our politicians' speeches. And so the stakes are getting higher all the time. So that's the manosphere. What we were also noticing, it was hard to miss, was that there was an increasing interest in Islam. Now, when I say hard to miss, it's in the title of the article. Andrew Tate made this phenomenon hard to miss. He really brought it into the limelight. And for anyone who doesn't know who Andrew Tate is, lucky you. And he's
Know who he was. I know I saw that he has been charged in Romania, I believe, on some stuff. You could fill us in, but whereas my engineer Hal knows who he is, I never had heard of him before.
Well, if you were at school in the United Kingdom right now, I think it's probably over 90% of children who know who he is. So he's a massive influencer. He is an online influencer. He draws his fame from a variety of different ways, but his fame has been growing all the time. And recently he started by being interested in Islam quite publicly, saying that it was the last strong religion, the last hope for the world. And then he made that final step and converted. Now, lots of people think he was doing it for attention. It doesn't seem that way. He's had Qurans with him ever since he converted. He talks about the Quran. He has discussions. Nobody can see into his heart, but it doesn't seem flippant. But at the same time, he is not giving up pretty un-Islamic behavior, and that's what he's in trouble for in Romania. He's been running a pornographic sex ring, and he's been under house arrest for a while, and then recently, just last week, I think, charged with trafficking women for the purposes of sex work, and also he hasn't given up his drinking drug lifestyle, which he's also very he also propagates that. But despite this very un-Islamic behavior, he has been welcomed by a good chunk of Muslims who see this as a welcome understanding that Islam is the answer to a lot of society's ills right now.
And his brother is charged too, I understand.
Yeah, and a couple of others alongside, yeah.
What is the basic thing that brings the right and traditional Muslims or conservative Muslims together? What are the forces at work? Was it an accident? Because, I'm pretty used to right-wing bad-mouthing not only blacks, women, gays, but also Islam. And this was something new was happening for me. How did it come to be?
This is it. It is it. When you think about it through that lens of the far right, it is very surprising because they've traditionally been extremely Islamophobic, and partly because of anti-immigration feelings, but partly because of Islamophobia relating to terrorism risks and those sorts of threats to society. But when you actually take a step back and look, and let me point out here that we were talking about a specific section of the far right and a very specific section of Muslims. This isn't by no means all. It's a very small fraction. But when you understand that actually a lot of their values are core values and shared, then it starts to feel a little bit more natural that if you do want traditional gender roles and traditional family structures, and if you don't want any LGBTQ rights in your societies, then actually you can see where they align. And that's where we've seen it most visibly over protests to do with LGBTQ teaching in schools. We've seen that all over the world, in fact, certainly all over America, but also Canada and Britain. We've seen far right factions and Muslims protest together against a more diverse, inclusive curriculum.
Yeah, I did see that some Muslims who had received support from LGBT people back in the day have now kind of withdrawn, said I shouldn't have participated where LGBT flags were. LGBT community and many others came out to support Muslims after 9/11 when, they were getting blamed for everything. And now it's a shift. Yeah.
And people are really rowing back on that. And it seems as if a lot of politicians have enabled it. Like, probably this isn't a shift in beliefs, but there's been an allowance to become more vocal. So we've got Trump, for example, who was always quite inclusive about LGBTQ back in the day. And he's moved radically on this position. And he says the kind of things that then encourage other people to become more out in the open about their beliefs, about women's roles and those sorts of things. And so I think what we've had is a culture, partly stemming from the vicious culture wars online, that have made these things more sayable.
Lydia, you already mentioned the manosphere, where I guess people go to get reinforced on their inadequacies, etc. But they're also they refer to the Matrix. They use the name from the Keanu Reeves film, I guess. But what does the Matrix mean to them?
Yeah, well, it's directly from the film. And actually, it's called the Red Pill movement, because the Matrix is what's controlling us all. And in conspiracy theories online, that can easily be formed of these shadowy forces pulling all the strings, who are often Jews in the conspiracies. It's a centuries-old anti-Semitic trope to say that there are these secret forces behind the scenes controlling the banking and controlling the media. And so that's how they're controlling us all. Now, in the film, you can take a red pill to wake up to reality and escape the Matrix, or you can take the blue pill and carry on in your illusion and carry on living your life very happily as before. And so if you subscribe to this, people are always telling each other, take the red pill, wake up, become aware of what is really going on around us. And what's really going on is that some people are benefiting at the expense of men, and men are losing out in this new world order.
You talk about the traditional role of women in Muslim societies and Muslim communities, which pretty much is being a homemaker, raising the kids. But we know that in some countries, particularly those that are probably more affluent and looking a little bit more to the West, that started to change. Like women got to drive in, I think, Saudi Arabia. And I imagine that the pressure from women in those countries is continues to move for more liberation, and incrementally, I would think, of women. What is the situation with traditional Muslims, and are there other denominations of Muslims? I mean, is it one group of Muslims? Is it a small percentage, or is it? Are there Muslims that like Progressive United Church of Christ versus Southern Baptists here in the United States?
It's not so much about the different sects, it's more about the different cultural contexts they're living in. And of course, that varies hugely across the Muslim world. And women in many countries have markedly more success in certain sectors than in the West. But what's important here is not the reality of how patriarchal or conservative a culture or a country is. It's more to do with the perception amongst these groups in the manosphere. And the perception is these very traditional, patriarchal, structured, hierarchical societies. So we see a lot of respect for strong leaders, such as Putin or Saddam or Assad, or Erdogan in Turkey. There's real respect for that kind of strength at the top, and standing up for what's right and standing up for your country in a way that, with all of our human rights discourse, they don't see people as standing up for their own culture in the same way. And in that, and so yes, there are many real examples across the Muslim world of women with very few rights relative to men. But I think what is more important is that perception that women know their place, that women raise the children, that as long as they're provided for, they're happy. And that's how to keep everybody happy. The men are happy and the women are happy in that traditional structure. That's what they're really grabbing onto.
One of the things that really came up for me early on in the article, and then you do address it, is there was a emerging alliance of the Muslim community, say in Dearborn, where the largest concentration Dearborn, Michigan, of Muslims, I think, are in the United States, and the left or progressives. And that seems to be a little bit undermined or changing. We do have two Muslim Congress people, and one of them, represents Dearborn. And my understanding was there was a situation not in Dearborn, but Hamtramck maybe, or some town in Michigan where they had celebrated Pride every year. And then once the majority was Muslim on the city council, they reversed that on public property. And the left, who really felt like they had supported Muslims in their time of need, called them out on it. But this has implications for the next election. And I'm wondering your take on that.
Oh, absolutely. There are political implications. And that left alliance is proving to be, let's say, not as stable as you might assume. Partly this is because the right is changing its discourse on Islam, which is half of our argument, that it's no longer a knee-jerk Islamophobic response to any Muslim topic, but actually a lot of very prominent far-right commentators are welcoming Muslims onto their shows, onto their podcasts, and having very friendly, respectful conversations. So Islam is no longer being demonized in the same way on the right, which enables Muslims to feel more able to vote that way. So that's part of it. And then the other part is the rising amount of homophobic, misogynistic legislation being passed. Means that the more conservative elements of any community, not just Muslims and not just Christians, but any very conservative, patriarchal, hierarchical culture will find things to like in this new right.
Are there progressive Muslims these days, or any groups of Muslims that you can cite for us? And, I'm always looking for, well, if this is going south on us, what are we going to do, and who's out there to make alliances with and work with?
I do need to stress, I am talking about a very small amount. These are very conservative. It's not the norm. There are plenty of progressive Muslims. We've got a Labour Muslim mayor of London at the moment here in the UK. And
don't you have a Muslim high up in office in Scotland?
First Minister of Scotland, yes. And pro-gay marriage, actually, which sparked a huge backlash against him. That was one of the things, actually, we covered in the article. That was a bit of a lightning rod, actually, when he came out in support of gay marriage. So no, lots of prominent and on the right here in the UK, we have a very prominent Baroness Varsi who is a Tory, but she has very progressive values around women and all sorts of things. So no, I'm not saying that we weren't at all arguing that the Muslim vote is shifting wholesale. No, it's a fraction, but they're building an alliance, and that was something that was previously quite hard to imagine, and we can't say for certain how important these numbers are going to be come the election next year.
Lydia Wilson, what led you and Rasha Al Aqeedi to this place where you've been working on this for a number of years? I know that she is from Mosul. Fill us in on what led you to do this research and to raise the specter of this terrible situation.
Oh, well, I've been working on radicalization for a long time now in an academic context. I think probably 10 years or more now, that I've worked on pathways and mechanisms to radicalization. And in lockdown, I was unable to carry out any fieldwork, obviously. And so I shifted my attention to radicalization online. And actually, I joined the University of Cambridge, their computer lab, and I worked with the Cybercrime Centre there on on manosphere and on the manosphere, sorry, and misogyny and hate speech online. So I spent a year observing, reading these communities, which wasn't particularly pleasant at times. And we gained an understanding of a lot of these fairly misunderstood at times subcultures. And then I joined New Lines, and then things began to change. So Jordan Peterson became a very prominent patron of Islam. Patron or what can I say, not a patron and not a fan, but he became very interested, and he hosted a lot of Muslim thinkers on his podcast. And that fascinated me because I knew he was popular in the Middle East. I'd noticed that for myself on a trip. And so I wrote about Jordan Peterson, and then Andrew Tate came onto the scene. Rasha wrote about Andrew Tate, and then it was through our conversations on both of our articles where we really started to think that something new was definitely emerging. So it was more it was more brainstorming with colleagues that really got us to think, no, this is urgent now.
What do you have planned in the future? I mean, this is an ongoing situation, and I'm sure there will be follow-up articles to the one that was in New Lines in this, I think, the summer issue. What do you got in your bag of tricks, so to speak, coming up?
Well, we've had a lot of interesting responses online, pro, anti, in between. And there are a lot of interesting points being made about how universal this is, as in, does it vary over different countries over the West? And there are also interesting points about this isn't just Muslims. You know, extremist Hindus, extremists of all stripes can find common cause on this. Yes. Anybody who has these extreme views towards women can find a common cause. And that's deeply worrying. But at the same time, it's still very unclear exactly how big this movement is going to become and how influential it will be. So it's a question of keeping our eye on it. The other major issue to keep an eye on is, of course, threats of violence, because there are elements of the manosphere who have become violent, notably incels. We had the Isla Vista shooting. We've had Toronto convict somebody over incel ideology, and we've had the Plymouth here in the UK. So everybody's having more, we are seeing much more violence in the name of manosphere ideology, let's say. And that ideology is spreading explicitly to the Muslim world, and with things being translated. And so we're kind of keeping an eye on that as well. But also, just watching it interact in this way, we'll just be monitoring the influences going both from the manosphere to the Arab world and from Islam back into the manosphere.
I understand that Rasha had engaged online with some of these people. Have you done that too?
Yes, I have a little bit. I've interviewed people. I prefer interviewing face to face or on the phone or those sorts of things. And I've interviewed across the Middle East on these issues. I think online you can't ever really control what is being meant, and whereas in a conversation you can kind of have more control over the discussion and kind of make sure that it's going somewhere productive. So we have different techniques, but they complement each other very well.
There's also, I should have asked this a little earlier, but not only is this going to the manosphere and to dealing with the matrix, it's also going on in Canada. And there was some stuff that you covered in the article. You want to share that a little bit about the dire situation that might emerge in the North?
Well, there was video footage emerged of children being encouraged to stamp on the pride flag at a protest. Again, at that protest, there were far-right elements and Muslim elements joining together to protest LGBTQ issues being taught in schools. And of course, Toronto has had the incel van attack. It's suffered violence in the name of incel ideology, of somebody not being able to get a woman and determined to kill women because of it.
Lydia Wilson, I really want to thank you for coming on. I'm going to repeat the name of the article. It's in New Lines magazine, which is a new magazine and we're going to have more authors as well as our friend Danny Postal on. The article that you and Rasha Al Aqeedi wrote is called How Andrew Tate and the Far Right Made Common Cause with Islamists. And it goes on to say Western groups find in Muslim communities what they believe is a prototype for a social contract free of wokeism and women's liberation. Lydia, is there a way people can get a hold of you or a website or something where they can read more of your stuff?
Oh yeah, newlinesmag.com. All of our information is on there. So and all of our articles are available for free.
Newlinemag.com. Well, I
Yeah.
want to thank you for staying up so late over there in Great Britain. I think it's probably getting close to 8:30 or so now in the evening. And I'm really honored to have talked to you, and I learned a lot, and it raised some concerns and things I need to pay attention to. So feel free to come back on the show anytime you got more you want to share.
Thank you. I'd love to.
Okay, thank you. We'll be right back with more Live from the Heartland. Stay tuned for a little bit of sports with Gordon Thomson. And now for our sports section. We suggest you do sports and not war. And we've got with us our really close buddy. We miss him all the time because he's no longer in Chicago, but he is here with us from Newark, Delaware, the one and only great track coach, teacher, human being, Gordon Thomson. Good morning, good afternoon to you, Gordon.
Hello, Chicago. Hello, Michael James and the world of the Heartland at home.
We're doing it. So you just been to Florida, and you and I last year went to Florida to case out your old stomping grounds of Gainesville, where you ran track and did a lot of other things. And you were just down there again, and you had a car that blew up on you and you had to go back. Tell us a little bit about your great adventure.
Well, I bought a Honda Accord thinking that the engine would run forever. And sure enough, I blew a rod down in Gainesville, Florida, and had to replace the engine to the tune of about $10,000. And beats buying a new car these days or even a used car these days. And so I everybody has little ups and downs with their mechanical
Tell me.
and the human body.
I love that car because we drove all over Iowa, Missouri, Illinois. We put a lot of miles on that car, and I'm hopefully you'll drive it back out here and we get to travel around some more.
Yeah, I did nickname that car Ebbets after Ebbets Pass in the Sierra Nevada mountains, right near Donner Pass, where the ill-fated transmission of the folk in the 1800s in a big snowstorm. Yeah. So down in Gainesville, Florida, I was watching the College World Series with a bunch of my buddies. That was University of Florida versus LSU, Louisiana State University. And I'll tell you what a College World Series it was. It was just a phenomenal. And Game one was won by LSU in a really tight match of from 4-3. And with my buddies, we watched game two. And that was just an onslaught of just hit after hit, home run after home run. And Florida just outdistancing LSU 24-4.
And you thought you were golden then.
Oh my God, we would have thought we were in Fat City, yeah. And with my buddies came up a dialogue of rivalries, and I said, hey, when you were going to school here, who was your rivalry? And we all agreed it was University of Georgia was our number one rivalry. But
that's
now,
track and field or football or everything.
Primarily because of football, and that was, the world's largest outdoor cocktail party is the Florida Georgia game, and they're really heated contests. But now, over the last 5 years, my number one rival for my university is LSU, Louisiana State. And I'm wondering why that is. Well, how did that transition come? Well, it's hard to hate Georgia. They're doing a lot of things right. Their football coach is very well coached. The team is doing things on the up and up, not underneath the cloud of investigation. But and the town of Athens is a great town for music and activity and social life. That town is really happening. So it's hard to hate Georgia. LSU is easy. LSU, it's really easy to hate. The fans are obnoxious. The town is the only thing going on in Baton Rouge is LSU.
Well, we used to get community coffee from Baton Rouge for the Heartland Cafe, but other than that,
well, isn't community coffee from New Orleans?
no, it's Baton Rouge.
So one good thing coming out of Baton Rouge. And, Red Stick, Louisiana is hot, humid, and really just a sultry town. And how the old ladies in the crowd are just really just have venomous mouths. It's just incongruous of just what's going on. So we got to talking. Is a rivalry helpful for just normal psychosis or normal psychology? Is it good to hate somebody else or good to hate another?
I don't think so.
Well, you'd think it wouldn't be, but you'd think about the duality of nature. The yin and the yang. I think
about it all the time.
The yin and the yang of life, the light and the dark side, the good and the evil. We need human natures. We need someone to oppose us. We need someone to be against. So our natural rivalries as Democrats is the Republican.
For me, I tend to choose teams by if the state is red or blue these days. And neither of those states meets my standards. Although I think Florida could come back around. I do, and actually Louisiana does have a Democratic governor. But didn't you and I see some of the same players when we went to a University of Florida game last year? So I was thinking I might scour my photographs and see if any of the people, I'll send them to you and you can see if there's anyone of note there. But what happened in the outcome of the World Series?
Well, game 3 was all LSU. LSU socked it to the Gators, just like the Gators socked it to LSU in game 2. So 18-4 was the score of the last game. So it's a best of 3 series. LSU won 2 of the 3, and they won their 7th national championship in baseball. Hey, almost all of the stands at Omaha were packed with LSU fans. And that school travels really well, whereas there was very few Gator fans in the stands at Omaha, Nebraska. Why is it? Well, hey, it's an easy drive for LSU. You can drive up north, but you got to fly if you're going from Florida. So it's a lot harder to travel. But LSU winning 7, congratulations to them on their 7th national championship in baseball. But Florida Gators won it in track and field this spring and in men's golf. And women's track and field finished runner-up. So track and field almost duplicated last year's feat of winning both the men's and the women's national outdoor track championship.
Let's talk a little bit about the women's NBA, Women's National Basketball Association. You have something on travel.
Well, yeah, Brittany Griner just came out with the shame of how the NBA structures their travel between competitions and them having to fly commercial versus chartered or non-commercial flights. And she got targeted. Somebody came out and a regular fan followed her, tracked her down, and in the airport was targeted with abusive language and abusive behavior. So that was the tipping point for the women's NBA to start making travel plans a little bit more like the men's NBA, where it's all chartered flights. Hey, I remember like when I was working at I think it was at DePaul, And I was on a commercial flight, and there sitting right next to me was Bill Lambier, who at the time was the head coach of the Detroit women's team, the Shock. And I couldn't believe that he's flying commercial in coach, and how it was possible for Bill Lambier to fit his 6'11" frame into a regular coach seat. He did it. And he's sitting next to me, and I just looked over and I knew immediately who he was. And he's trying to just hang to himself. But I said to him in a non-accusatory way, I said, Bill, as a Chicago Bulls fan, the whole city hated you. You were the number one evil for the Chicago Bulls. And he just cracked a big smile and he said, yep, I know. And that's all it took was, yep, I know. And that's all I got out of Bill Lambier in coach. But it just goes to show, here's a big dude, 6'11", forced to fly coach in a commercial flight. He'd already played his NBA career. He was already an all-star. Why to force this head coach of an women's NBA team to fly commercial and coach was beyond me.
So this has changed. They're going to now fly charter flights for women's NBA.
Well, it's expensive to fly charter. It takes not just a couple hundreds, but thousands and thousands of dollars to charter these flights. So it's tens, if not hundreds of thousands per flight to get a women's NBA team to travel. So it's a big money commitment by the NBA. But hey, it's necessary. So yep, now the National Basketball Association has agreed to upgrade women's NBA travel.
Oh, that's good. Now, I know one of your favorite things that we've talked about every year or whenever it happens is the Tour de France. And how about letting it go on? Tell us about the Tour de France and what you see coming up and when it is, et cetera.
Today, we're taping this on Wednesday, but as it comes live on July the 1st, Saturday, it's kickoff time. It's launch time for the Tour de France. It opens up on Saturday, July 1st. Hey, it's called the Tour de France, the tour of the country of France. But where does it start? Bilbao, Spain. So it's just over the border from France in the Basque region of Spain, and start and finishes in the great city of Bilbao, where we have some of the most phenomenal architecture in the world. The Guggenheim Museum, done by Frank Gehry, is in Bilbao, Spain, and it's really picturesque town. But this year's Tour de France is a replay of last year's, of two youngsters going at it head to head. 24-year-old Tadej Pogacar against 25-year-old Jonas Vingegaard from Denmark. So these two youngsters are part of the new youth movement in road cycling. And the advantage goes to Vingegaard, last year's winner, because he's got the stronger team. And you think, in bicycling, what does a team have to do with it? Well, you got to have support personnel, somebody to bring you water, somebody to hand you your food on your way, and someone to protect you, to surround, having a team of like-minded bike riders to surround you, to protect you when trouble comes, when crashes occur on the road. Maybe your bike gets a flat tire, having a teammate nearby so you could switch bikes and then ride on your teammate's bike, whereas you don't have to wait around for your team car to fix your flat. So having a strong team is really good. And there's one guy on Vingegaard's team that is especially significant, and that's an American, Sepp Kuss, and he's from Durango, Colorado, at altitude. So mountainous town, Sepp is well averse to altitude, and that is what he's great at. He's a really very light-bodied rider, so he can really fly up the mountains and really help protect his teammates and really set the pace and really set a tempo that other teams can't set, so that one by one, other teams fall off their supporting personnel, and just what's left is just the cream of the crop. So having strong teammates is great, and we got Sepp Kuss as the strongest American in the race.
Well, that's a hell of a name. And I had some good times in Durango, I got to say. What else you got? You got anything on coming up in track and field or the NC2As or anything happened that people ought to know?
Well, the NC2As was just a couple of weeks ago for out in Austin, Texas, and phenomenal job by the Florida Gators to set a new collegiate record in the last event of the day. And the Florida Gators had to win that event to win it, and had to have Texas A&M or University of Alabama, rather, to finish fourth or worst. So you can't control what the other team's going to do, but Florida went and did its business, set a new collegiate record in that event, 356, having like 4 or 5 teams under 3 minutes in a 4x4 is miraculous. And so they pulled it off, and the other team finished 5th or 6th. So perfect scenario.
Well, Gordon Thomson, we know you were a steeplechaser, and then you were a noted coach on a lot of fronts at a few schools. What is your favorite sport and why?
My favorite sport? Ping pong.
Really?
No.
Ping pong is a fun game, though.
Well, the only noted thing that I really got off about ping pong is it's the smallest square foot area of any Olympic sport. 48 square feet, and hosts table tennis. So a little known fact, and that makes ping pong or table tennis special in this world. What is my favorite sport? Whatever's going on, whatever's fired up at the time. Coaching cross country and track, what was my favorite during that? It was 3 different sports: cross country in the fall, winter track in the winter, and spring track, outdoor track in the spring. So what was my favorite? Whatever was going on during that time. During that time was my favorite. It's hard to beat cross country, though, with the team aspect of having 5 people score and 7 as a team, all unified, doing the same thing. Kind of like basketball, where all 5 know where everybody else is on that team, and have to have a good court presence, and everybody's got to be able to play their role and fit in.
I got a couple of things I want to mention. I did see that there's a possibility. I mean, Derrick Rose is probably not going back to the Knicks, and there is some rumors going on that he may come to Chicago to close out his career. That would be wonderful. We'd love to have him do that.
Well, who was Derrick Rose's coach at the Bulls when he was playing so well in Chicago? Well, we got to bring Tom back then. We got to bring get the band back. Huh?
He's coaching the Knicks. I don't know what the story is, why they're letting him go. He didn't play much at the end.
Yeah.
In
fair shake, Billy Donovan has been doing a great job with the Bulls, and I'm sure the city of Chicago is recognizing that. And he's a really hotshot dude, man.
Well, you like him because he used to be at Florida, right?
Well, I'd like anybody who achieves excellence that overcomes adversity. Before Billy got to University of Florida, only one coach, Lon Kruger, got Florida into the Final Four. And Lon found out really quick that the whole state is really not a basketball state. It's a football state. So Lon bailed and went to University of Illinois, and then had success, and then finished his career at Oklahoma. But Lon saw the writing on the wall that Florida was not a basketball, and was not going to be able to get basketball to reach the premier levels. Well, Billy Donovan did it. Yeah, he was able to assemble a whole cast of characters. Joakim
Noah.
Yeah, Noah. So phenomenal player on that, and my favorite basketball player, and outside of Dennis Rodman, and you know, anybody that's able to overcome adversity, those are phenomenal people.
Well, Gordon Thomson, it's always great talking to you. I miss seeing you. I miss being in your presence. We've done a lot of things together, including StoryCorps, which supposedly they're going to play. We'll let people know about that. Do you have any parting words?
Yeah, I do got some parting words. Michael, I heard about your bad fall in El Paso, Texas, and it's great for me to not see any scars on your face. So
I was very lucky, but I got to say, I got a very sore elbow, and my already roughed up, crashed shoulder from Durango, Colorado, back in the old days, is really sore. I am going to a doctor about it, but I'm back in the pool. I weighed in at 206 today, which, there was a time I was 255. I was a tackle. Now I'd have to be a linebacker or a quarterback, but that would be impossible. Anyhow, Gordon, it's great talking to you. And you say hi to your mom. And we'll have you back on sometime in the next month. And I'm looking forward to seeing you as soon as I can.
Yeah, I'll hopefully see you sometime in July.
Well, I want to thank all of you people who tuned in or turned on, however you get Live from the Heartland. Once again, it's on air and streamed on 9 o'clock on Saturday morning on WLUW. Also 8 o'clock on Wednesdays. It's on YouTube and Spotify podcasts. It's on Can TV, and you can get it with visuals, not only on Can TV, but at youtube.com/heartlandmedia/videos. Because we put a lot of effort into adding pictures to the footage. I want to thank our guests today, Lydia Wilson and Gordon Thomson. Next week, we've got Marilyn Katz talking about Israel, and I think we're going to have also our state rep, Kelly Cassidy, who was due to come on today, but had to go be with the president at a conference and a speech downtown. So I encourage you all to do real good in the world, because the world needs all the good that you do, that I do, that all of the people we know do. So all power to the people. See you next week.